Welcome, Bucs fans. Welcome to another edition of Here the Cannons. I'm your host tonight, JC Allen. With me on my left, I have River Wells, and on my right, I have Caleb Skinner. We're going to be breaking down all the position battles here coming up in training camp, which starts just 14 days away for media access, but 12 days away until players report. So super excited to get into that. We're going to be talking about Jalen McMillan. We're going to be talking about Trey Palmer, which one of those guys is going to win wide receiver 3, talking about the left guard competition, outside linebacker, nickel cornerback, all those things. But first, make sure you guys are liking, subscribing, or turning on the reminders. We are at 999 subscribers. You could be the 1,000th. So make sure you guys are subscribing. Any help, would love the support of the show. Appreciate you. We are Sports Illustrated's BucsGameday, Hear the Cannons podcast. Go check out BucsGameday for all your Bucs content. We got news, analysis, opinion pieces, so much stuff. We've got so many things in the works coming this offseason, into the coming season for you guys. I'm super excited to get into it and to share all the content that are going to be coming your way. So definitely stick around. If you guys haven't figured it out right now, BucsGameday is taking over. We're going to be the top site here soon. So jump on now instead of jumping on the bandwagon later. With that out of the way, I want to welcome my co-host here, Caleb Skinner, River Wells. Ask you guys how the heck you doing tonight?
I'm doing great, JC. Had to clean up the room behind me. You know, I don't have a professional looking office like you do. I've since fixed all my
walk-in closet.
Technical. Yeah, literally. Hey, whatever
it is. This is a walk-in closet. It's not professional at all. I took all the racks out.
It looks better than my couch behind me. I'll say that. But I got all the technical difficulties figured out. That cost me a few episodes, but glad to be back and just a couple weeks away from the start of training camp, where we're going to get really deep into football. And it's that time of the year, fellas. I'm excited.
Yeah, doing good. I don't know why you guys don't just get like a stark white room to do your podcasting, because I think that's the best way to do it. Obviously, you know, we're locked in, we're focused on the content, but no, going good. Really excited for football to come, as Caleb just mentioned, and we're almost there. So a lot to talk about before then, though, especially what we're talking about today.
Absolutely. 2 weeks away from training camp, 3 weeks away from padded practice. That means we're hearing helmets hit, not as much with the Guardian cap. So we're hearing pads hit. Can't wait for that. And that's when I think a lot of this competition is going to come to light, right? We've seen these guys all throughout the offseason in shorts and T-shirts and helmets. Pads is when we're really going to see a difference. And even Todd Bowles said when he was talking about, I can't wait to see them in pads. So I think one of the first kind of position groups battles that I'm really excited to see is this wide receiver group, because I think if you look at Trey Palmer last year, some inconsistencies, but there was also a lot of inconsistencies on how he was used by Dave Canales, and some inconsistencies with throws and missed opportunities with Baker Mayfield. So I'm excited to see. He's the one guy who's got that true game-changing speed on the roster, how he's implemented in this wide receiver battle with rookie third-round pick Jalen McMillan, who has just kind of taken over Bucs Nation with this little buzz and storm. You talk to anyone who's watched him, and it's clear that he is a very gifted player. Route running is really strong. Catch point is really strong as well, and he just kind of has a knack for finding the open spots and has been getting runs with the ones already in camp. So I guess, River, I'll start with you. When you're looking at this battle, because you've been at practice with me, what stood out to you between McMillan and Trey Palmer? And ultimately, what do you think is going to happen? Who gets that edge there to kind of win that de facto wide receiver 3 starter role?
Well, I like Trey Palmer, and like you said, there are some inconsistencies in this game that he's got to improve on from last year. Fumbled a little bit, route running, all that stuff. But he's very fast. He really showed that speed against the Eagles in the wild card game with that one touchdown where he just turned on the Jets. So I think he definitely has the means and wherewithal to be a wide receiver 3. That being said, remember Liam Cohen told us at the beginning of the year his philosophy is players over plays.
Right.
And I think Jalen McMillan's quite the football player. I've been very impressed with him. Everyone's been very impressed with him, obviously. He looks really smooth in his routes. Looks have really sure hands for sure. That goes for anything from the kick game to catching passes. And I think it's going to be interesting, but given how polished McMillan looks, and again, we got to put on the pads and see how he runs in those. But I kind of like him to be wide receiver 3. Thing about that is obviously he's more of a slot guy by archetype, but he's played both in college, and I think he could definitely play on the outside at the pros. So I like McMillan right now. I think Palmer definitely will still get some use in packages, even if he doesn't win the job per se. Whatever win the job means in an offense like this. But I like McMillan a lot. I know a lot of other people do too, and I'm excited to see him put on the pads.
Yeah, I think when you look at this competition, I wrote it in my wide receiver preview that came out today. I think the loser of this battle, I don't think is truly lost. I think when you look at the end of the year, you're probably seeing more of a 60-40 split in snaps with not discrepancies like 80-20 or 70-30 even. I think there's going to be, because when you look at the way this roster is constructed with Evans and with Godwin, there you don't have a burner. You don't have a guy who can stretch the field and take the top off of a defense, especially with the way Kate Otten plays and having Rashad White and even Bucky Irving and Chase Edmonds out of the backfield, opening things up. I think having Palmer on the field a lot is going to open things up for all those other players. Whereas McMillan, I think, is a very solid route runner. I don't want to call him a possession receiver because I think he's a little bit more than that, but he's kind of in that possession receiver type arc, I think. So it's one of those things where I think both will see the field. I think, and I was just talking to Josh Capel about this too. If you're looking for, I think it's going to be more of a game by game basis, right? It's going to be, okay, what do we need? What's going to be more effective this week against this cornerback, against this secondary versus next week or XYZ. But Caleb, when you look at the competition between these two, we know that there's going to be a lot of versatility. Palmer played slot last year as well as outside, and they're going to, Mike Evans played slot, Chris Godwin played outside, inside. When you're looking at these two in this competition, what stands out to you the most? And really, what do you think will give the other one the edge over the other?
I think, both of you guys have hit the nail right on the head. Each of them has their strengths and each of them has their weaknesses. But I think the ultimate factor here is that Palmer's got that extra year. He's got that year of experience of playing at the NFL level. He knows what he needs to work on at this level. And hopefully he is doing that this offseason. Yes, we know his speed is absolutely killer. Obviously, that touchdown that happened against the Eagles was very eye-awakening for everybody on that aspect of his game, but does need polishing when it comes to route running, holding onto the ball, that sort of thing. And then McMillan, crafty guy, great route runner, has shown good hands, but the thing that we don't know about him is how is he really going to do against these very physical corners or catching in traffic, because in college he was open pretty much all the time in Washington's offense. But ultimately, it's going to come down to that experience that Palmer has to be the starter, like you had mentioned, JC. I think it's going to be, on a basis, whether whoever your matchup is, on a week-to-week basis. So it depends on who you're going up against. Where do we want to, attack? Maybe this corner is better at press man coverage. So maybe we want to put Palmer out there, get him past him and turn the burners on. Or maybe we have a guy who likes to play off a little bit of zone, get McMillan out in space and see what he can do with the ball. So both these guys have intangibles that are fantastic for what the Buccaneers are trying to do, especially with Godwin moving back into the slot position now that Canales is off to Carolina and Cohen's in. So it'll be I think a 60-40 is probably perfect placement for their snap counts. And again, it'll be a week-to-week basis for who's going to be that wide receiver 3 starting if the Buccaneers and Cohen decide to trot out 3 wide receivers when they come out into the game.
Yeah, I think you brought up some good points too with McMillan. That's one of the biggest things that was questioned, even when I wrote about him, was physicality with, the bigger corners and stuff like that. Like a guy like, I think him going up against Tyke Smith a lot in camp is going to help him because that's the type of guy he struggles with. So, it's going to be interesting when these two put the pads on and they're asked to go out there and compete for that spot. I think, another thing you mentioned too, it's like they're not playing the pack. No, not to take anything away from there. There's some good players in the pack, but when he's going up against some of these top echelon corners and top echelon, nickel cornerbacks and stuff in the league, and for the first time, and it's the first time he's faced it, that's going to be a little bit different than when, Trey Palmer, who kind of learned some of the nuances, learned some of the tips and tricks and stuff like that from doing it last year. So I think there's going to be a nice split. I don't think you can necessarily name a winner because I think in the end the Bucs offense is going to be a winner. Have the flexibility to put those guys out there on different plays, different drives, different games and stuff like that. With having a Mike Evans and a Chris Godwin out there to kind of take away some of that attention from them and say, all right, you got a man, go man beater, let's do it. Palmer.
And I think the thing is too with both of these guys, JC, is I don't think either of them really is going to care who wins that starting job. I think both of them just want to, produce when they are on the field to give the best team at a chance of winning and then success, throughout the whole season. So obviously we know 1 and 2 is Mike and Chris, and that's what it's going to be. So anybody who's 3 or 4 or 5 or whoever it may be, it's going to be interchangeable. So those guys, if they have the understanding that, hey, whichever one of us is in, we got to do our job and that's going to make us successful, then that's what we got to do. And I don't think either one of these guys is that type of mentality of a player that's going to be selfish about that situation.
Yeah, I don't think there's any divas on this team. I think that's the biggest thing when you look at this roster is it's all for one for all. It's like the 3 Musketeers, but the 53 Musketeers out there because everyone's, got one focus, one goal in mind, and that's to win and that's to be better in all facets. And, one area that Jason has kind of invested in heavily over the years, thought it'd be looking a little different, but abrupt retirements from Ali Marpet, and obviously career-ending injuries to Ryan Jensen kind of threw a fork in the road. And they thought they could let Kappa go, and then you get hit with all these other things like that. Is building this offensive line. Of course, it started in 2020 with Tristan Wirfs, this kind of youth movement on the offensive line. Then you got brought in Luke Gedeke the next year, or Robert Hainsey the next year, sat behind Jensen for a year before, being thrust into the starting role. Then you got Luke Gedeke at right tackle. Last year, Cody Moak was the guy. This year, they bring in Graham Barton as part of this youth movement. But as we know, they can't address every position at the same time. And unfortunately, out of all these young guys, that left guard as an open spot. And that, I think, they went out and brought 2 veterans in with a Ben Bredesen, Sue Opita. They drafted Elijah Klein in the 6th round, so did spend some draft capital there. But I think this is one of the bigger spotlights during training camp is who's going to win this left guard position, because we know the last couple of years the Bucs running game has been atrocious. At times, Baker hasn't helped himself necessarily with sacks, but they've let up some pressures that maybe they feel like they shouldn't have. I think when you look at the left guard position this year, I think it's more of a Band-Aid than a long-term fix with Bredesen and Opeta both on 1-year deals. I'm still of the ilk that I think the best 5 is probably Hainsey at center and having Graham Barton play left guard this year, but they're steadfast on wanting Barton to play center for them and improve that position in the middle of the field. But River, I ask you, and we'll start to you first, and then Caleb, we'll start with you on defensive side. But when you look at the competition between Opeta and Bredesen, obviously Bredesen's been getting more reps with the ones towards the latter half. How do you see this all shaking out? Is it Bredesen's job to lose? Do you think it's still kind of switch back and forth once pads come on? Last year we saw Dave Canales set his 5 and run with it. That was it. Do you think that's kind of what we're going to go into training camp with? Do you think we're still going to have a battle? And which one of those guys has impressed you the most so far throughout the offseason headed into training camp?
I definitely think there will be a battle, particularly because I think it's kind of important for the Bucs to nail this pick. And like you said, it is a Band-Aid going forward. But that being said, you want at least average play from that left guard spot. And if Barton ends up playing really well and Mock takes that step up in his 2nd year and Gedeke and Wirfs keep playing the way they've been playing, which is pretty good, then you got a really solid offensive line there. Bredesen obviously didn't play great last year. Whether or not that's because he was constantly shuffled around on New York's line, that could definitely be a reason. But it wasn't amazing. Opeta doesn't really have a lot of experience. He did start a few games here and there, but Bredesen's got a lot more experience. So I think Bredesen will be going in the guy to start. And then I do think pads are going to be the most important thing here. Obviously, when you're not wearing them, I think Bredesen's got a decent edge from being a veteran and getting those reps. But pads are going to be really big, and how Opeta and Bredesen react. Opeda's very talented. Todd Bowles mentioned that he was impressed by both of them. Of course, that's probably coach speak, but they could both be impressive. So I think that's going to be one to particularly watch, because I think that in training camp when the pads are on, that's when the trenches really get into the competition per se. So I think Bredesen's going to start in the lead, but I wouldn't be surprised if Opeta gave him a run for his money, given what we know about how Bredesen played last year and how physical Opeta is.
Yeah, I think when you look at the two, right, Sewell got six starts last year with the Eagles. Didn't really, I think the Giants game was by far and away his best game. You look at how he graded out with an 80.6 offensive grade, in the high 70s in run blocking and pass blocking. I think when you look at the rest of his starts, they were kind of average at best. It wasn't really anything to write home about. I mean,
that would be
average.
Good for the Bucs though at this point, for that position.
Below average, really. Right,
so,
compared to last year, But yeah, I mean, below average. And then when you look at a guy like Bredesen, the first thing that jumps out to you is, my God, this guy played everywhere. He started the first 2 games at left guard, spent the next 4 games at center, then back to left guard, then the next it looked like next 8 games at right guard, then finished the season at center. No consistency for him really.
The first swing lineman of all time. Yeah.
Right. And I mean, no consistency in his grades too. I mean, he was better at pass blocking than run blocking. His best game was week 7 at center against Washington with a 72 grade. You look back, a couple of years ago, a little bit better as far as run blocking. And when you look at, I think both of these guys, and they fit differently in a running scheme, right? I think Peter, you look at his size, 6'4", 305, it definitely sticks out to you. The way he's built too. Bredesen's 6'5", 315, but I think Sewell Peter's just kind of built a little bit stockier. And size is something that they've been wanting to get at that position. But I think Opeta's probably better at that power, that gap, where Bredesen's better in that zone, that inside, outside, mid zone type stuff that the Bucs are primarily going to run. So I think, that kind of maybe give him a leg up in the competition. But, of course it's going to come to pads and who's going to be able to separate themselves. So Caleb, what do these guys need to do to separate themselves when the pads come on? Because right now they look great in underwear and helmets, but that means nothing when you've got Vita Vea barreling down on you and Kalijah Cansey looping on you from the other side. When pads come on, that's what's really going to separate these two. And what do you think that looks like?
Yeah, I mean, the elephant in the room, obviously, it's really hard to get a grasp on an offensive line battle until those pads come on. So like, even you guys being there through mini camp and everything else, it's like, what do you really get to see besides them chopping their feet? You don't really get to see a whole lot other than them chopping their feet and moving through whatever exercises they are doing or warm up drills, whatever it may be. So it's tough. But this really comes down to, it's really, with Opeta, you've got the brute force strength, right? That, he's going to be able to push guys, move the pile when you are running between the tackles. And then when it comes to Bredesen, you have, more technique and versatility. As you had mentioned, JC, these guys play along the whole entire line. The Bucs want to get a little bit beefier, a little bit stronger, a little bit more strong-headed for that run game. So it would point towards Opeta being that guy. But if Bredesen comes out in training camp and shows that he can do that while maintaining his technique and his versatility along the offensive line, then he will, I think, clear Opeta for that starting job. I'm not sure if it's one of those situations where, you're the guy for the entire season, like Canales rode everybody last year. Luckily that, we didn't have too many injuries that cost guys to miss a lot of extended time or anything. But I think it's great that we have two guys and even a third, and maybe a fourth if you move a guy around or two. So it's a position that needed to be taken care of. I like the idea that you started off with, JC, of having Hainsey or Barton there and then Hainsey at center would be great. But Buccaneers are very, set in Graham being there starting at center. So leaves you with these two guys ultimately. Maybe Klein will come out and, show up both these veterans and then it's his job to lose. But at the end of the day, once these pads get on, if Bredesen can do what Opeta does well, then he is going to earn that job because he has proven it, lightly. Neither of these guys are going to be, gangbangers down there, in the trenches for the Buccaneers. But, yeah, I mean, it's a tough one to call right now. I don't think I could, give it one or, pass the baton to one or the other on who is going to ultimately come out of this until we do see them in pads.
Right. It's the ultimate, like, okay, sure. Like we can talk about it. Wide receiver is much easier to talk about. I think even the nickel cornerback, I think even outside linebacker is a little easier to talk about too, because you can see skills and traits. But of course, when these guys aren't doing what they're doing, blocking people, it's really harder to put that in perspective. And I think you brought up a good point. Sue's got more of that raw power. And I think with Bredesen, you've got more of fleet-footed guy who can really come around on pulls and stunts and stuff like that, and do some things where you're getting him in front of as a lead blocker and in front of guys and being able to escort the back down the field and stuff like that. And it's going to be really interesting to see how this all plays out. I think you mentioned the depth too. I think that's the most important, right? I think you've got a guy in Opeta who started 6 games. You got a guy in Bredesen who started, 16 games, but it started a lot more than that. You still got Brandon Walton on the roster who can play guard, tackle, a little bit of center if he needs to in an emergency situation. You've got Elijah Klein, who they're high on, who they're developing, and let's see what he does in pads and if he can crack the 53-man roster. So, I think when you look at the two guys, it's hard to say now. We all thought Opeta was going to be the guy based on comments, prior to when we had that first introductory meeting with Carberry, the new offensive line coach. We're like, oh, did he just give something away? Is Opeta got the starting crack? And he did. But then as minicamp and OTAs progressed, we start to see Bredesen there more. So I don't think this is not nearly far from over. I think once pads come on, they're going to want to see a look at both of these guys. And that one, and don't forget the dark horse candidate too. If Graham Barton beats out Robert Hainsey fairly quickly, they might say, all right, let's see what Hainsey can do at left guard. And then he could be a surprise addition to the competition. Although, much like last year with Nick Leverett, who got, saddled into the backup center position, didn't get a chance to play left guard. And I think he probably would have been better than either of the guys they had there. But because he was too valuable as a backup center, they kept him there. So it's going to be interesting. I really do. As Abraham mentions, Elijah Klein has a chance, and you mentioned Caleb. I do like Elijah Klein a lot. Just talking to him, talking to his coaches too, like the background that he has. I think he can be a player. Maybe not this year, but hey, it doesn't matter where you're drafted. It matters what you do on the field, and everyone's got a shot. And I don't think either of those guys are above and beyond, Elijah Klein at this point. I think they've got some veteran. And I asked Carberry about that. What if Elijah Klein is a guy and he's not a veteran? What he goes into it? That's a good question. Whoever plays well and whoever shows out is going to have the opportunity to win that spot. So jumping to the defensive side of the ball for these bigger competitions, we'll get into some of the smaller ones later in the podcast. I know Bud Cannabis mentioned 6 wide receivers, and we'll get into that battle there because there's some interesting names there to throw in the mix. But jumping to the defensive side, we'll start. We'll stay in the trenches, Let's stay in the trenches here with the outside linebacker room. Yaya Diaby has all but kind of taken one of the spots of those. Shaq Barrett departed for Miami after the Bucs released him with a June 1st designation. They brought in Randy Gregory, who I guess you can say they brought in, but he hasn't been in yet other than to sign his contract. And they also drafted Chris Braswell to go along with holdovers Joe Tryon-Sharinka, Marquise Watts, who made the team as an undrafted free agent last year. I think he was even a tryout player. I don't even think he was. And Jose Ramirez was the team's 6th round pick. Heard some glowing things about both of those younger guys behind the scenes, been working their butt off. You can tell just looking at them, River. I mean, looking at Jose Ramirez, you can tell he's kind of lost some of that baby fat that he had on last year. Looks a lot bigger. I think it's going to be a pretty much wide open competition there. I think maybe JTS, Randy Gregory, Chris Braswell are the three front runners, maybe. But I definitely don't rule out Marquise Watts or Jose Ramirez making some noise in this competition. But Caleb, we'll start with you. Out of those, talking about that other spot opposite side, Yaya Diaby, who in your mind is that front runner for that spot? And what are you looking most forward to at training camp to see what they can do to pull away and cement that spot for them as a starter opposite Diaby?
Well, JC, if you pay me a couple $1 million to come and sign a contract for a year, I'm going to come and sign it anyways, and I might not show up as well. But besides the point, Randy Gregory, he's kind of shot himself in the foot, put himself in Todd Bowles' doghouse. So even if he does show up, he's not going to steal that spot just from training camp. It's just not going to happen. We don't know what kind of shape he's in. We don't know where he's at headspace wise, depending on what's going on off the field. If it is something off the field, we don't know if that same mindset, going back to that, is his mind covered the playbook? Has he looked at it at all? Is he going to be ready? And all the signs are pointing to no. You're not here, so obviously you're not ready to be here, no matter what it is. So we can go ahead and eliminate him out of the equation here. So it's really ultimately going to come down to rookie Chris Braswell or JTS in my mind. I think the other guys, although good, aren't ready to step into that role of being a full-time starter. Right now, I think I would have to say JTS just because he's been in the league a little bit more. He's coming into a contract year, if you will. Obviously, most likely not going to be from the Bucs based off of them declining his fifth-year option. So if he wants to prove it to anybody that he's at least a possible starter or a high-end depth piece that can be slotted in and go and earn some money, then he's going to have to prove it this year. So I think I'm going to give him that starting nod. I think he's finally going to, get that fire under. I'm not saying it wasn't there before, but there's multiple times last year where he was about like this close to having a sack or this close to getting a batted ball, or like he was right there, but he couldn't quite make the play. So maybe with a little bit more coming at the opposing offense, JTS will have his chances to fully and successfully complete those plays. I think that is going to drive him a lot. Being a contract year, trying to earn some money is going to drive him a lot. And then, this is his first shot at being a full-time starter. Never having that chance, knowing, when you were drafted that, hey, we have guys here. It's up to you to work up to that level to see if you can steal one of those spots. Never got to it. Never kind of shaped out to be that first round pick that Jason Light, ended up or wanted him to be. And then you talk about Chris Braswell, sparingly saw time during his time at the University of Alabama, but when he was on the field, he made plays. Play after play after play, made plays. So I can see this kind of being like that wide receiver 3 talk we were just having a minute ago. We're going to see guys based off of matchups, who they're going to be going against, what type of offensive line they've been going against. What type of offense are we going up against? Is this more of a running team, or is this a team that likes to pass the ball on a regular basis? Who gets better after the quarterback? Who can bend around the corner better? Who can get inside better at rushing the quarterback? It's going to be kind of a basis on that. I could see it being more, even closer than a 60-40 possibly, kind of rotating these guys in and out, because I do like both of them a lot. JTS, obviously we know is bend, but there are things he lacks with that power. Can't quite finish the play. And then with Braswell, finishes the play, playmaking ability, but doesn't have that much playing time underneath his belt when it comes to live reps. But I would go with JTS to be the starter to start the season. But as Braswell gets acclimated into the flow of the game, gets to figure out how these NFL offensive linemen like to go about blocking in different schemes, he might start to tick up, and we might start to see his snaps increase and potentially end up going over the snaps that JTS is getting game.
Yeah, I think you brought up a lot of great points there. I think when you look at Gregory, I think I'm in agreement, and River will get to you in a second, but you're not here. Like, I mean, and let's face it, you're not a guy, you're not a Justin Houston, you're not a Jerry Hughes, you're not one of these guys who have bounced around the league and has had great success at pressuring or sacking the quarterback. You've been very underwhelming. You've been suspended multiple times for marijuana. You're suing the league and the Broncos outright right now for $500,000 in fines. Like, what are we doing here? And he just got fined $130,000 potentially for not showing up, and will continue to get fined as well for not showing up at training camp if you don't show up. So I think you can kind of take him out of the equation. And I think you're really kind of looking at JTS, Braswell, and as Bud Cannabis said, maybe Watts might have an edge. I don't think so. I think he's going to be more a rotation guy, but I think, JTS, and Abraham alluded to it in the comments. He is so good in coverage and run defense, but specifically coverage, that I feel like it's kind of hindered him a little bit throughout his career, because Todd Bowles knows that he can drop him and get exotic with his looks and send pressures, whether that's Antoine Winfield Jr. or whether that's, another guy, or, whether that's Levante or Devin last year or whatever like that, that he'll drop JTS in coverage in a situation where JTS could have got a pressure, could have got a sack. And I know sacks are sexy, but pressures are just as important, in my opinion. Not everyone's, but I think pressures affect the game just under what sacks can do. Obviously, sack end of play and everything like that. But I think pressures lead to interceptions. Pressures lead to whispers and ghost feet. I think all those things. Sub-Zero, can't wait to see that. I think all those things. If you're consistently getting pressure, we saw it. What was it? Was it Sam Darnold, right? Sam Darnold against the Patriots. I'm seeing ghosts out there. And if you're consistently getting pressures, that can happen to a quarterback, especially a young quarterback, who the Bucs are going to be playing quite a few of this season. I think that will, those are just as important as sacks. So, but I'm not going to sit up here and just make excuses for JTS, because one thing he hasn't done well is finish. No, he's had the quarterback multiple times. He's probably could have had 10 sacks in one season already. I think he's had 5, and 4.5. But he could have had 10 sacks if you just finished the dang play. And I think that's what drives Bucs fans crazy. But he does come up with huge plays at huge times. He had the forced fumble last year. I forget who it was against towards the end of the season. River has a better memory. Maybe he remembers that. But he had a forced fumble to end the game for them towards the end of the year. Could have been, was it the Falcons? Was it the Falcons? I don't know. I'm not sure. I forget. But anyways,
was it the Panthers game? The last Panthers game?
Was it the Panthers game? It was the Panthers game.
Yeah,
it was the Panthers game. So I think Logan Hall recovered or something. But anyways, I think he's got an opportunity. I mean, when you look at him as his first year was a bust. His second year, where he's given that starter spot, Shaq Barrett goes down halfway through the season, and now he's getting all the attention on him. Last year, Diaby came out of nowhere, really, and kind of just overtook him and relegated him to more of those coverage type third down plays and stuff like that. This year, he's got an opportunity. And Caleb, you mentioned it. Third year option's gone. He's going to get paid next year no matter what. I mean, he's not walking out of free agency unless he gets injured with, he's going to get $7 million at least as a baseline, just because he's a first round pick. He's a pass rusher. He's so good in coverage and run support. He's going to get paid next year by a team, whether it's the Bucs or not, but he's got a real opportunity in front of him to go make real dollars next year with a team, with the Bucs or another team. But it's going to come down to him actually finishing plays. Now, Braswell's interesting too, because he's looked very good so far. And I'll let Rivers speak on that because in camp, he's had like back-to-back sacks. He's just hard hitting the pad. He's looked really good. So I think there's the opportunity for him to overcome JTS at some time, like Caleb said. But River, how quickly could that be? Do you think it's JTS to lose? Do you think it's as maybe possibly to lose in training camp? Or are we talking down the line there? Do you think Braswell takes over? Or do you think JTS has a firm grip on it this year and you see a steady rotation of a guy like Braswell throughout the season, but maybe not necessarily, capturing that starting spot, kind of like what happened to him at Alabama?
Quite frankly, I think if Chris Braswell does not win this competition, I think the Bucs are in trouble. I think Yeah, I think you don't not pick up JTS's fifth-year option and then draft their edge rusher in the second round for him to not win that competition. And I think JTS gets a pretty bad rap among a lot of Bucs fans. That's somewhat undeserved. Some people will have you think that he's unplayable. He's absolutely not unplayable.
No.
He definitely has made some good plays, and he has shown flashes of talent. But I do think that sort of rotational role is where he fits in the best. And I think if you get Braswell to get that starting job with what we've seen from him so far at Alabama and in camp, like you mentioned, very athletic, very physical. Looks good around the dummies, but obviously fads are coming on soon. But I think that's the goal. I think you'll want Diaby on one side, then you'll want Braswell on the other, and then I think if JTS is allowed to sit in that rotational role, I think he could do a lot of really good work. On Gregory, I've said this a lot, but Gregory was kind of confusing to begin with, I feel, because, I mean, you've got JTS, Braswell, Diaby, and Nelson. And then if you throw Gregory in there, I mean, he's probably not going to play teams, right? So if you're going to keep a guy like that on the roster, well, Marquise Watts can play teams, and he's young, and he's shown some flashes. Right. So where does Gregory really fit in that rotation? I think that was an interesting question I sort of had, that he has not done a lot to remedy by just not showing up to minicamp. So no,
I think you have like one guy who really is that speed rusher, right? With really good bend, and that's Watts. And I think to sacrifice a roster spot, I mean, you're already talking about you've got JTS, Yaya, Watts, Nelson. Braswell, Nelson. There's a chance I think they could keep 6, but I think Watts has got a really good shot at making the roster too. So I mean, you're already at 5 there. Do you keep a guy like Gregory, who is underwhelmed, who has underperformed, and who's obviously been a bit of a problem throughout his time in the league, or do you go with someone like Jose Ramirez, who's got a little bit more speed and really kind of blew up his last senior year? People had him. He went in the 6th round or 7th round. People thought he could be a 5th round pick in the draft after his testing and stuff like that. I think you need those younger guys, those speedier guys, those guys who can play teams, those guys who can, again, we talked about it earlier, but I'm going to talk about it throughout this whole thing because it matters so much. The new kickoff rules are changing everything we know about bottom of the roster construction. You used to want those small cornerbacks and those small, safeties, and you still want them as gunners, but you wanted them so they could get down the field faster. When you're lining up 10 yards apart and you're going to battle against each other, you don't necessarily want those smaller guys. You want those bigger body. You want those tight ends, those linebackers, those outside linebackers, those running backs to an extent. You want those body frames there more than the wide receiver, the skinny wide receiver and cornerbacks to jet down there. So, 6 outside linebackers. If Jose Ramirez shows out that he can be on special teams, and you have that as well with Watts, then yeah, I mean, Randy Gregory doesn't have a spot here, I think.
Exactly. And, I think the value that those guys like Watts Ramirez would bring to other aspects of the game is just more important. And I think the big hole that the Bucs had was that they needed a guy who I think probably, someone who should be better than JTS to complement Diaby. But JTS isn't exactly, awful. And you got a lot of really good rotational guys there, like JTS could be, and then Nelson could be. So I think if the Bucs have that in Braswell, then I think Gregory's usage is kind of limited in the first place, because I don't really know where he fits in the puzzle piece. And as far as keeping 6 OLBs, they kept a lot of outside linebackers last year too. So I think that's something that Todd Bowles likes to do. I think he likes the usefulness from guys like Watts, and then Ramirez was on the practice squad. But if he's not there, then he could be a guy that you could use in special teams. So I like the idea that if Braswell kind of pans out to how the Bucs think he will, I think guys like JTS could really thrive in that sort of environment, and that pass rush could get a lot better, and that's exactly what this team needs. So I'm excited to see that competition and see how it goes and see how Braswell develops, and see if maybe JTS can make a really good push for it in this final year with your option and try and make a run for it.
Right. I think you're right there. And I think it's not like the wide receiver position where you looked at and you're like, wow, behind, and we'll get to wide receiver 5-6 battle later, but where you look at, you're like, wow, Mike and Evans, and then everyone else is year 2 or less. Like we need maybe a veteran guy on there to kind of just help the room out. I don't think you need that. You got Nelson, you got JTS who's been around for 5 years now. I think you can get some second year, first year players and young dogs and say, all right, let's go. Go
I
earn
agree.
the keep.
Yeah.
Let's who let the dogs out? And you can do that with Watson, Ramirez, and Diaby and Braswell, and have JTS, and then hopefully next year when they have some money, the hope is that they get their number 1 pass rusher in free agency, or maybe through the draft, because I still think that's their number 1 need. And then Jason goes back to the second round and gets a left guard, just like he does. But I think that would be clutch for them. But I'm concerned, but I'm not super concerned about this outside linebacker group, because I think what they have around them, and we'll talk about defensive line a little bit in the depth chart there, but I think they're in a good spot, especially what they did in the secondary as well this offseason, which is where we'll go next. I think they put enough pieces around there where they've got some good guys in coverage who, as we can create sacks by coverage. Coverage sacks are a real thing. And they've got some good guys in the interior who can bring some interior pressure. All that does is help out the edge rushers. So I think the moves that they made there, especially bringing one Tyke Smith in the 3rd round of the draft from Georgia, safety, nickelback, kind of do it. It's kind of like a do-it-all player in the mold of a Antoine Winfield, dare I say. Probably not as good as a coverage guy, but definitely a guy who can do a lot of things for you and be very disruptive on defense as a playmaker. He'll be competing with Christian Izien and maybe to a lesser sense, Tavier Thomas for that nickel cornerback role. Obviously, Izien coming in as the incumbent there after winning it as an undrafted free agent last year over guys like Josh Hayes and some other veteran who barely played in the league. I can't remember his name at this time and point. Apologies. But he won it last year. And, there's a lot of buzz around him. Obviously, the 2 interceptions last year. I kind of just got schooled on a stat I didn't know. I'll ask both of you guys, how many pass deflections do you think Izien had after his 2 interceptions in week 1 and 2?
After his 2 interceptions?
Yeah.
Was it 0?
It was 0.
Yeah.
0. So he bought himself a lot of goodwill with the thing, but I also think there's a lot of times where, he wasn't being helped in the best of ways. Remember, a lot of times he'd be on Ryan Neal's side, trying to communicate. Ryan Neal was trying to communicate with. At that point, I have no idea how to, a bar of soap, slippery when wet, can't grab onto anything, including coverage assignments. But so I think, what we saw from Izien was that no matter what, the moment wasn't too big, whether it's a blown coverage assignment or this or that, he got back to it and didn't let it affect him. That goldfish mind and that confidence that the team had to say, all right, we're going to keep rolling you out there. You'll find it. You'll find it. And I think he starts this season as a starter in the nickel. And we've seen that so far, but Tyke Smith, I think, is going to give him a run for his money. We saw him first day of rookie minicamp, gets an interception here at OTA's minicamp. He's screaming in the backfield for a sack. Obviously, he's got the pedigree, very similar defense at Georgia than they run here. He seemed to pick it up well, extremely fast. Talking to Jordan Whitehead, he was, he turned the tape on as soon as they drafted him. And was like, wow, this guy knows stuff that I didn't know until 2 years ago. So I think there's a lot of buzz and excitement about Tyke Smith. He's still got to go out there and earn it. Tavier Thomas hasn't really wowed me from what I've seen so far, River. But when you look at this competition shaking out, is it Christian's job to lose? Is it Tyke's job to win? Does Tavier Thomas have a chance, or is he more of a depth guy? What are you seeing when you look at this and what you've seen from minicamp?
I don't know if this is the most pressing competition, but it is the most fun, I think, because there's a lot of fun answers. There's a lot I like about Christian Izien. I like his motor quite a bit. I like the way he tackles. He had 47 solo tackles last year. I don't know if he's quite good enough in coverage to play a nickel corner role full time. But the reason why I think this is fun is because I think Todd Bowles is going to want him on the field in certain aspects. And I think that's a very valid thing because, like I said, really high motor guy. He can make some plays. And if that's not at, nickel, then how would that work? There's a few options, obviously, but I think they like Tyke Smith. I think if you ask me,
definitely like Tyke Smith. I can tell you that for sure.
I don't know if this is like a flaming hot take or not, but I think he's got a really good shot to kind of start there at that role. And I do think Izzy will still be on the field because I think he does a lot of stuff well. Maybe not necessarily the full complete package. And like you mentioned, he started off pretty strong and then kind of took a downturn after those first few weeks. But there's some talent there, I think, that you shouldn't waste. And I think they're going to want him on the field. So I like Tyke Smith to start, actually. And if that doesn't go well, then, I mean, if you throw Izzy in there, I don't think he's phenomenal in certain aspects, but you could do far worse than that at nickel corner, as we saw last year. I think he played solid in a few aspects. So give me Tyke, and then I think we'll definitely still see Izzy in on the field, be it certain safety packages, be it whatever. I think the team likes both of them, but I'll take Tyke Smith.
Yeah, I think, Javier, you have a nice veteran guy that can push them, that can help them to grow because he's been in the league for a while too. But I think he's more relegated to that backup role. You can never have enough guys, that can play, right? And I think with their lack of addressing the outside cornerback position, they've got Dean, they've got Zion behind them. They got Josh Hayes, who's actually moving from inside where he practiced a lot last year to outside. They're cross-training him at nickel corner safety. Now he's being more trained at outside, and a guy like Tyreek Funderburk, who we can talk about that competition a little bit later down the line, but I've got my own reasons to think it's not really a competition, but we can get into that. I think, when you look at the between Tyke and Izzy, I think with Tyke, he's got so much more versatility than Izzy. And I agree with you, River. I think they want to find ways to keep him on the field, to get Izzy on the field, just because of, he's not going to be a guy who's going to go up against a power Z wide receiver in the slot or anything like that. Or, a power X wide receiver in the slot. No, I'm all messed up. Anyways, a power wide receiver in the slot or a big tight end, he's not going to do anything like that. And maybe that's where you have Tyke come in, and then you use Tyke. If it's not that, then Tyke can come and be that big linebacker type deal, or just dime packages and have him coming in screaming on a blitz, or playing the quarterback size and getting turnovers like he does. So I think there's an opportunity where Izzy's a pseudo starter. And then you have Tyke just playing a role because he's got so much versatility. And as you guys can see on the screen, we are 1 subscriber away from 1,000. So if you haven't subscribed, please do like, subscribe, turn on reminders. If you're watching on Twitter, thank you so much. But come over to YouTube. It's much better. Get comments and everything like that. Like, subscribe. Let's get up to 1,000. Mine doesn't do it for some reason. Let's get up to 1,000 subscribers here. And we appreciate everyone who's tuned in. We're just going to keep this train rolling. We got so much stuff coming down the pipeline. I'm excited to get into it with you guys during the season for sure. But Caleb, when you look at this competition, do you see it as more of let the best man win, or do you see it more as how can we utilize both of these guys' strengths the best? And is that as like a Christian Izzy as the guy, and then Tyke playing a versatile role? Or do you think, hey, Tyke's the best guy out there, we need to keep him on, and we'll figure out how to get Izzy on the field afterwards?
Okay, I think when we saw Izzy last year early on, and the 2 picks, and everybody's like, oh wow, Todd Bowles has got his guy, the defense is going to be improved, back to making turnovers, creating plays, all this, got super excited. And then you heard nothing from him the rest of the season. So I think Buccaneers fans were expecting a lot more, whether that's, coverage bust on his part or bust on somebody on the back end that was supposed to have him, backed up there. Either way, it still did not work out there that second half of the season. So it's tough to say that, you're automatically going to hand Izzy the starting job right off the bat, especially when Todd Bowles and company go out and draft a prototypical Todd Bowles football player is kind of how I see Tyke Smith. He goes out, he makes plays. He plays super hard. He has a great football IQ. He might not be as great as Christian possibly when it comes to, coverage, but he does get down close to the line of scrimmage. He plays well down there. So he's more of a balanced guy, and he does create these game-changing plays, whether that's, forced fumble or an interception, which is what Todd Bowles has talked about wanting to do more of this year. Get back to creating those turnovers that, put your offense in a better position to go out and score more points. So if that's something that they're aiming to do and they're standing strictly by that, then I easily see Tyke going in and winning that job, specifically because of he's a smart kid. He plays a lot older than him coming in as a rookie. He's been playing for the University of Georgia, which is almost an NFL franchise-led collegiate program. So he's coming in ready. He's not coming in not knowing what's going on. And then what you guys are talking about from minicamp, he's already making explosive plays, which is great to see from a rookie. Christian Izien, not necessarily known for making explosive plays. We did see 2 highlight plays early on in the year, but not known for that. So I think it could be, like you had said, JC, that pseudo starter. Izien might get it, on paper when they release the depth chart or whatever before the game happens. And then you see Tyke come out on the second snap of the game, and now he's playing. So it kind of it just depends, but I think this is Tyke's job to actually lose, and I think Christian's kind of going to have to win it back here in camp.
Right. Yeah, it's going to be interesting to watch for sure. Different angles, different things that both guys bring. We just hit 1,000 subscribers. Thank you guys so much. Appreciate that. We're at 1,000 subscribers, 12 episodes in, a lot more to come. We're going to do some rapid fire. I'm going to go to you guys. Let's try to keep it under a minute in your responses. With some of these smaller position groups. So we'll start with Caleb. We'll go to running back. Running back, do they keep 4 running backs on the roster? Is that Sean Tucker? Or do they think they keep 3 running backs like they did last year? Is Sean Tucker fighting for a practice squad spot or a roster spot?
It's hard because I really like Sean Tucker coming out undrafted. I mean, he was one of the best college running backs over the course of a 4-year career in the history of college football. So what he can do, it's there, but is it going to be good enough to be at this level? Obviously, it's not. Right now, he is slotted in as that 4th guy in the running back room behind Chase Edmonds, which is behind Bucky Irving, the rookie draft pick, and then obviously our RB1 and Rachaad White. So it's tough call, man, because you hate to see a good guy. He's a great person as well, and then obviously can produce and play on special teams if need to be, whether that's
that's
returning.
Time. Is he the running back 4 or not?
Oh man, hitting my limit on 1. That was fast. I will say he'll end up getting cut. I think we keep 3.
Practice squad. All right, River, for you, tight end 3. Do you think they keep 4 first of all? And tight end 3, the battle between Keith and Devin Culp, maybe Tanner Tala, who's got some love. Who do you think wins that battle for tight end 3, or do they keep 4? And who's the odd man out? Time starts now.
I think they keep 3 tight ends. I think Devin Culp beats Keith. I think that's about where I'm at with that. Culp is very athletic. Different type of tight end. Keith's more of a blocker, but I think they're going to find more use for. They're not going to play as many 2 tight end sets. So you'll have Otten, you'll have Culp, and you will have Payne Durham. And I think that's what they're going to.
All right, there you go. 3 tight ends: Culp, Otten, Payne, with 5 seconds to spare. Caleb, coming to you. Wide receiver 5-6. There's 3 guys who I've got my eyes on. It is Raheem Jarrett. It is Sterling Shepard, who was brought in, and undrafted Cameron Johnson has been surprising some people. Kind of a little bit similar to Devin Tompkins, but a little bit bigger as far as weight and size and stuff like that, but still explosive. Very good route running hands. It has caught the eyes of coaches, players, and Bucs fans alike. Who wins that spot? Keep in mind, special teams are usually at the end of the roster. Who wins that spot for wide receiver 5 and 6? Your time starts now.
Wide receiver 5 and 6, or you mean 4 and 5?
5 and 6. 4 and 5. Well, McMillan and Palmer are going to be 4. Are going to be 3, 4.
Right.
So 5 and 6.
Fair.
Go ahead. Time starts now. Restarted. Go.
I'll do better on my minute this time. Quick and simple. There's a reason you brought in Sterling Shepard. He's proven he's going to be your wide receiver 5, and then I'm going to see Rakim being there as your wide receiver 6. you guys have been there at training camp, and there's been some good buzz surrounding, Rakim entering his second year. We saw him sparingly last season. Was he dealing with injuries? I can't really remember what it was, but we'll go with Shepard 5 and then Rakim 6.
Okay, there you go. I think that's going to be really interesting here because I think special teams, Sterling Shepard's not playing special teams. So unless you have Jalen McMillan or Trey Palmer playing special teams here, then I think Cameron Johnson has a good shot at maybe upseating him. River, you were talking about, give you a quick rebuttal on that. Go ahead. What do you think?
No, I think that makes sense. It's going to be an interesting battle, but I think Rakim Jarrett definitely is going to end up around the team, on the team. Made some good plays in minicamp, did some good things last year. Cameron Johnson could be interesting, but, obviously there's going to be some other guys in the roster who've already been on the practice squad who might have a little bit more to prove going in, so we'll see how that goes.
Yeah, it's definitely going to be 5-6 to me is a little bit more interesting to 3 because like we argued earlier, go watch earlier in the pod. I'm not going to go over it. All right, let's hop to let's do the defensive side of the ball. Now, I think roster construction is going to be huge for this because where do they keep those extra guys? What kind of bodies they're looking for on the defense or on the kickoff, everything like that. But let's go with defensive line. We'll go to River. Last year they kept 6, but they had several on the practice squad. Mike Green was the guy there. They brought in Judge Culpepper. They've got a couple of guys like Eric Banks, Lual Ugalek, whatever his name is. No one knows how to say it. What do you think they do with defensive linemen? Do they think they only keep 5 and stash a couple of guys on the practice squad? Do they keep 6? And who do you think is that 6th lineman going to be after the likes of Vita Canseed, Logan Hall, Greg Gaines, and Will Golston? Your time starts now.
This is going to be really interesting. I'm not entirely sure. 5 and 6 is definitely both viable. I think they might go 5 just to stash some guys in the practice squad, and they might go heavy on OOB and receiver probably. It's probably going to be between Green and Culpepper, depending on which one they like more. Green's got a little bit more playing experience in Todd Bowles' system, but Culpepper's shown some good things in training camp. I'm going to go ahead and say Green makes it. That'll be my time.
Okay. All right. So 6 defensive linemen. Green makes it over Culpepper. One thing, again, roster construction is going to be something I am looking forward to seeing. We've seen special teams, but we haven't seen the new kickoff crap. We'll see that more coming up in training camp. I'm very excited to see that. Jumping to outside linebacker. We just talked about it a little bit. But who gets that final call? How many did they go with? Did they go with 6? Did they go with 5? Caleb Skinner, you're on the clock here. Is it Watts? Is it Ramirez? Do they keep, even if you get rid of Gregory, do we keep 5 or 6 outside linebackers? Who's the 5th or 6th outside linebacker to make it? Your time starts now.
Yeah, I think you want to have as many guys as possible there, especially with it being kind of one of those unknown what you're going to get out of everybody outside of Yaya Diaby. So I think ultimately you want as many guys as possible. So we're going the upper end of that. I think, between, who is it? Jose and who did you say?
Marquise Watts.
I think Watts kind of wins out there. I think, didn't we see Jose on the practice squad last year?
Correct.
Yeah. So I think that's kind of the direction that we'll probably be headed again.
If Randy Gregory makes a team?
If Randy Gregory makes a team, which he's not.
I just wanted to blow the whistle at you. I'm going to skip River actually this time. I'm going to go back to Caleb because I'm going to challenge him to not be a homer here because we're moving on to linebacker spot right here. Last year, the Bucs kept 5 linebackers. If everything shakes out and they keep the same amount this year, Kalen DeLoach is likely to make the team, but Antonio Greer has made plays as well as an undrafted free agent linebacker who signed as well. Plus, they have J.J. Russell. Let's say the competition is between J.J. Russell and Kalen DeLoach. For that linebacker 5-4 spot. Who do you have? Do you think they keep 5 linebackers between J.J. Russell, Kalen DeLoach? Who do you have in that spot? Time starts now.
Yeah, 5. Probably a smart idea. I'm gonna go Watts. As badly as I want to go with DeLoach, it's just hard seeing a guy who is undersized, obviously did make some playmaking moves at Florida State last year, but undersized, went undrafted, isn't necessarily going to be, a guy who does it all for you. He's just going to be, a solid piece. So Watts, I think, has a little bit more intangible to
Russell.
what he is able to do on the field, and that's who I'll roll with.
All right, last one, and then we're going to get out of here. River Wells, I'm going to challenge you. Outside cornerback, wasn't really touched. We talked about it. Josh Hayes and Tyreek Funderburk has been lighting it up. You got to go through those two guys. Again, keep in mind, Josh Hayes led the NFL in special teams tackles, but is more of really an interior guy than an outside guy. Who are you keeping in that position? Your time starts now.
This is really, really hard because there's reasons to like both, like you mentioned. Hayes did a lot of really good special teams work last year. Funderburk has really been impressing, though, in regular play. I think he might have the edge there, but it's too early to tell in that instance. But if he does in training camp, I think they might go Funderburk because you can probably still get some special team stuff out of him. But Hayes' special teams prowess is not to be underestimated, so I could definitely see that either way. I'm going to go Funderburk, but would not be surprised if Hayes manages to stick on the roster because of his special teams prowess. But if Funderburk can play the corner position a little bit better in training camp, I think it'll be him.
Again, and Ross's construction, again, it's going to be so huge because depending on what they keep on offense, if it's only 2 quarterback, if it's only 3 running backs, if it's only 3 tight ends, that maybe opens up a possibility for a 6th, defensive back there, 11 defensive backs total, and maybe you keep both Hayes and Funderburk. So it's going to be fun to watch. Training camp 2 weeks away. Again, 12 days until rookies report, 13 days until everyone reports, and then 14 days until we report. So, and we'll be reporting. We'll have daily training camp diaries where we're, getting, all of our observations out. We'll have quote pieces. We'll have players will be talking. So we'll get stories up on that too. Stick over here at BucsGameday for all of your off season, all of your in-season training camp stories. We are pumping stuff out daily. I think we're averaging about 5 to 6 pieces a day. We're just crushing it right now. I've got my training camp preview series right now. We've got some other great stuff coming on down the pipeline as well. So thank you guys for tuning in to Hear the Cannons. The podcast is going to be doing awesome stuff too. We're going to be growing. Maybe we'll be taking it live on location someplace. Who knows? You never know what we're doing. We're always evolving and changing here. That's what makes us one of the best spots here.
I got a shout out, JC.
What?
I want a quick shout out to Lenny from Panama City having the Bucs going undefeated on Rich Eisen show.
Lenny, and we'll have a show too where we're gonna go down case game by game, and we'll all break it down here on the BucsGameday crew too, give you our thoughts. So we got so much stuff coming down in the works. I appreciate all of you guys for coming here. We hit 1,000 subscribers today. That's awesome. Big shout out to y'all. Again, like, subscribe, turn on notifications so you guys can be informed anytime we're here live on the show. We got the laser show behind River right now. But I want to thank you guys, as always, for being in here. Thanks for all the comments. We try to get to as many as we can without the show going over, which, unfortunately, I'm the host, so we're going over. That's going to do it for us here. For Caleb, check his Twitter out. He's right there. For River, check his Twitter out. He's right there. My Twitter right there. Stay tuned. Stay plugged in. We're bringing you guys the best Bucs coverage here. We're only 3 years old, but we're taking over. Watch out the other guys. BucsGameday is here to stay, and we're here to make the other guys pay. So for Caleb, for River, for everyone here at BucsGameday, for Here the Cannons, that's going to do it for us. Again, we'll be back here next week with, what do we say we're doing next week? Position battles today. We're doing a position by position preview, kind of what we did. I'll get into some storylines, stuff like that. River has an article up about the storylines, all that stuff. So we'll be back next week with another show, another edition of Hear the Cannons here on BucsGameday, Sports Illustrated. We're out of here. Peace.